Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on our 9th live webinar. My name is Jose Merchan, and I'm a senior architect here at Blazedpath. We are having this webinar today to cover the topic of security and how to set up security with the proper logging on your application. And we are going to go through different topics such as how to set up properly the authorization server, how to connect to a security scheme for APIs, for external APIs and microservices, and we are going to go over how to use the routings options to get our access controls for the different screens and the APIs, and we are going to use the passes to pass over the credentials to the APIs and microservices. So before we start, please subscribe to the channel and give us a like. It helps the community grow. Furthermore, we are giving away 5,000 credits for anyone who has registered for today's webinar and open their Blazedpath account, cloud accounts within their within the next 24 hours. Just remember, you have to sign up in the link down below and actually validate the Blazedpath account in order to get those extra credits, which are pretty much good for a lot of testings. So please write any questions in the chat. We are going to try and answer all the questions we can on the Q&A section when we are done with the examples today. But as soon as you get a question, just write it on the chat. We are going to be back to it later. So let's quickly jump over to the table of contents and see what we are going to talk about today. So first, we are talking about the authorization servers, and we are going to talk about a little bit of access tokens and how we use them to validate what the user is supposed to see and do in the application, and how to control that. Then we are going to start over with the rules section. That's actually in here in the end of the contents, because that goes directly tied to the front end. And then we are going to talk about jointly on the security scheme and passes, because those are the way Blazedpath has to extend the authorization from the front end to the microservices and the external services in case you have any kind of authorization on the back end. So that's the subjects we are going to cover up today. Let's quickly start talking about the authorization servers. First we're going to say a little bit of introductions on each topic, and then we are going to jump over to our examples for today, so you can then follow along and get a good idea on how easy it is to use these tools to connect to these external services. So on authorization servers, since the front end is where the user will be actually accessing the solution, we are going to need to connect to the authorization server from there, from the front end or from the mobile application. And to connect to the authorization server, you are probably going to have some kind of connection string, maybe a URL, and you're probably going to use some kind of secret and kind of client ID that identifies your client with the authorization server. So the authorization server is the one that enforces the access control, and those come from the authorization servers, and we have to figure everything that the user can access in that tool before making the previews in Blazedpath, if you want to actually see the difference between the different views of different users in your application. So we are going to be following a couple of mock examples, then we are going to do an actual connection to an access to an authorization server. So if you don't have an actual authorization server up and running, you might want to start over with the simulated access tokens because those are very easy to set up and lets you start very quickly the development. So now that you have this simulated access token, we are going to start going over a couple of security rules. So let's start over directly to the application, and we are going to start over with the different examples. So this is a template of an application. This is a very simple one. This is actually the security hands-on example, but it's a little bit simplified in order to get more tests for today. So everything that was in 4 different, so our other application had a much bigger architecture diagram. It had 4 microservices and 4 databases, but in order to everything compile faster and get more tests for today, we are going to be using the simplified version. So either you follow up with this version or you clone the security hands-on from the Blazedpath Essentials. It's the same solution, there's no difference. Just remember, everything you do in here you can do over there. So to actually start creating those simulated access tokens, we are going to go to our environment configuration, and in here I have 3 environments. I have set up one environment to actually connect to an authorization server and actually manage the connections there. And I have 2 other environments, one that actually simulates the connections from a manager, and another one that simulates a connection from a salesperson. So the manager and the salesperson might have some different necessities. Maybe the manager is entitled to give discounts when he sees fit, or maybe he needs to see more information that the salesperson that may be restricted. So those are the examples we are going to be tackling today. So we are going to open the environment configuration for the manager, and we can see on the front end that we have on the 3rd line. Actually, let me use some zoom in order for you guys to see it better. There we go. I think that's better. So if you see in here, you have simulated access token. We have Micah Silverman. This token is set up, and if you click on edit, you can see that there is a JSON file in here. This JSON file is the token that the authorization server gives you back whenever you actually log in. So you actually connect to the Blazedpath. Blazedpath redirects you to the authorization server. The login page, the sign-in page, the register page, everything is on the authorization server. And then the authorization server gives Blazedpath back a token with the information from the user. So in this case, we want to check on this field. This is the field that we are going to be using in Blazedpath to actually make the distinctions among different tiers of user or different roles. And of course, this secret is also needed because of the connection for the authorization server. So these are the examples. Just remember that the Blazedpath offers the compatibility with 3 different standards. We are using OAuth 2, OpenID Connect, and Keycloak. The example today is for Keycloak, but the idea is that it should be very easy for you to integrate with existing security standard and have it as out of the box as possible, as we are going to see today. So this is the manager role, and I am going to be using this attribute on the front end. So I'm going to go to the Explorer, and I'm going to go to the onload event. So this onload event comes by default in all of the front-end systems. We are going to start doing some work here, because if you can see on the 10th line of the blocky editor in here, we see that we have a launch blocky. That's actually the launch of the application. So we are going to set up the security rules before we launch the application. So when the application is up and running, it already has all the restrictions you have set up. So the way you actually set up security rules and this is the quick segue from the authorization server to the rules, because the authorization server just connects to the authorization server and returns the actual security token. The one we are using today, let me quickly put it up. So we are connecting to this this authorization server. We are going to do the third example is the one we are going to connect. Right now we are focusing on the simulated access token. So we are simulating a response from this site, but we are going to show you how to actually connect to this site on the last example. So let's say I'm using the simulated access token, and then I now want to start restricting or allowing access. So by default, everything's allowed. So what I want to do is start disabling the different paths and the different elements inside inside the different web pages. So we are going to be looking for the blocky set security rule, and we are going to throw it in the middle of the comments on line 8 that says start setting up the security rules, and we are going to use a path. So this path comes from, let's open the CMP transactions. This is a screen that I want to restrict. This is like a list of past orders that previous salesperson has done. It doesn't really matter the business logic. We are just going to focus on the access layer. So if we go to the logic tab, we can see that we have a path in here. So this whole page is called from a menu, and we want to restrict this whole page for all users by default. So we are going to unload event, and on the path we are going to be using double quotes. We're going to use the slash, and we are going to go transactions. And this by default, just make sure that I'm typing it correctly. And I am going to the action I'm going to select is disable. So if I click on run using the manager simulated access token, I am going to see that I actually don't see that menu entry. And we can see on the next example that page is actually going to pop up in the menu. So we are going to open localhost 9003, and we can see a page. This is the welcome page. As we can see, this is a grid, and we can see a column here that's called credit amount. And if we go to the menu, we can see that we only have the billing. So there's another entry in here that says transactions that we are going to see how it starts changing. Just remember that there is a column here called credit amount because we want to restrict that exact column, and that's our next example. So we are going to use another security rule, and in this example I'm going to go again by using the path from the routing section. But I don't want to restrict the whole page. I just want to restrict elements inside that page. So instead of just leaving the path as is, I'm going to go pipe, and I'm going to go double asterisk. So this double asterisk basically means all of the elements inside the page, but not the page itself. So here I'm going to go disable, and the next step I should do in this, because I'm basically here, I'm just disabling by default. I want to start controlling against what's the actual user that has logged on. So to check the actual user, because if I'm already loading the application, I have already went to the authorization server and I already have the user token because the user has already logged in. So by now I should be able to use the get user info blocky, and I'm going to store this information on a variable I have prepared in here that says user info. This variable here, can be anything really. Just know that you can define any kind of variable to store the information from here, because the object you get from the get user info is exactly this object from the get access token. So as this access token gets more complex, you might have to update your object in Blazedpath. So we have user info, and we are going to start adding conditions here. So let's go if. So if the value of my user info dot role is equals to manager, then I'm going to re-enable the paths. So the way to re-enable the paths is set security rule, again transactions. This is the full path, so I'm re-enabling this page, but only if the user role is manager. And I'm going to enable the billings elements, billings pipe, and then instead of allowing all of the elements, I just want to allow one element that's exactly that column. And the way you do that is using keywords. So I'm going to use credit amount as the keyword in here, and that keyword comes from that page. So I'm going to open the customer info in this info page, and if you see here, it's the same grid with the same columns. And I want to go to details. After selecting the block, of course, you go to columns, and I'm going to open the definition of the column. And in here you can see that there is a field called security options. So basically here, this is the keyword I'm using. So this exact keyword, if I typed anything else, I can just grab it, copy paste it, go back to the onload, and in here add copy paste. There's other possibilities you have. On the next step on the stepper, there is an action here. We are going to check that this action is also permitted or available for the manager. So this is a record action called discount, so the manager can offer discounts. So this keyword is called apply discount. So I'm going to add that option as well. So security rule, billing pipe, apply discount. Click on enter and go enable. So I'm going to click on run right now, and we are going to see that the credit amount column is there. We are actually going to see again the transactions page that we've disabled and we've showed like 5 minutes ago, and we are going to see the apply discount action. So reopen the page. As you can see, there was only billing on the previous version. So if we go back to the tab, we can see the billings, and we go to the tab right now, we can see that the transactions pop up. We can see the credit amount column, and if we click on next, we can see the discount amount. The way we can actually check if this is working correctly, I'm going to go over to the other environment called sales, and I'm going to quickly show on the simulated access token. The role is not manager here, it's salesperson. You can have multiple roles. You would have to manage that using custom behavior. So if I click on run, we are going to see that all of these options are no longer available. Just give you a second to load. And there it is. So as you can see, the transaction page is no longer there. We no longer have the credit amount column, so the salesperson can't see the credit of this person. And if you go to next, we no longer have the apply discount action. So basically, you can restrict any piece of Blazedpath. You can restrict whole pages, you can restrict elements inside widgets, you can restrict actions, you can basically do whatever you need to in order to get a full granular control of the of what your users can and cannot see in the application. So that's that's how you manage on the front end itself. Now we should start talking on how to manage those credentials, but on the microservices and on other external services. But before that, we want to show how to actually connect to an authorization server. So we are going to quickly go to the authorization servers environment. We're going to click on the gear. I'm going to remove the past the past authorization server. I'm going to re-enable the connection. So click on discovery. So this is the OpenID Connect URL. You can find it anywhere on the page, on the internet. There's a lot of tutorials of how to set up your environment. For this example, we're going to use a test one. So we have the OpenID configuration, the path that ends in well-known OpenID configuration. Click on OK, and this will return basically JSON of all the different endpoints. And we do have to use the client ID and client secret in order to actually get the there we go, get the application to work. So I'm going to click on run, but this environment is no longer already logged in. It's going to give me a prompt to the authorization server. So I'm going to wait for it to launch. There goes the microservice. And there we go, the web front end. So as you can see now, it's getting us directly, redirecting us to the authorization servers, and we are post by the sign in option for the account. So this is where you would actually sign in. You would click in sign in, and the key cloak is going to redirect you to the actual to your application with the token we've been using until now. So that closes the loop on how to use the authorization credentials for your front end. And now we will start talking with the credentials for the microservices and the external services. So those are where the security schemes and the security passes that we've briefly touched on the table of contents. Let me go back here. So we are going to talk about on the security schemes and the security passes that you can see the second and third bullet in there. So basically the security schemes are used to control the accesses to different API endpoints, and you can basically create a security schema of 3 basic authentication types. Let me go jump in and let's start creating them. So the security schemes go in the microservice where they are used. So let's say my welcome page is calling the list customers function, because that's basically the API endpoint that populates the grid. So I want to add a security scheme just for that function, because it's faster for this example. So I'm going to add a new security scheme that ties directly to this function. So let me add a new security scheme. That's right click, new security scheme, and I'm going to call my new security scheme webinar. And there we go. So the security schemes can be of different types. You have basic authentication. This is basically where you use the user and password. You also have the API keys, which you can probably see that a lot in market APIs, such as Google Maps APIs and Market Cap APIs for crypto. Those are usually pretty static, so you might want to have that not as a login option, but as a config parameter. or somewhere else you can actually persist a API key. And we also have the better token. This is the one that changes with the user session. So as you can see, with the security schemes, you have a customizable behavior for these security schemes. This behavior is executed each time that this security scheme is called for. So let's say you call an API that has this security scheme. This is where you are going to customize behavior for that security scheme. You are not validating anything in here. This is for an extra that you want to, extra behavior you want to do. So let's say you define the security scheme and the extra steps. Maybe a common one could be logging for credentials to keep track of what users are connecting to your APIs. So if you use a bearer token, you can see who is accessing your API, and you can then use that to track, I don't know, credits or whatever else. So we're not going to get very crazy with this implementation, but what I want to do is actually show you what's coming in this token, which is basically the same information that comes from the access token. Because this bearer token is basically the same access token we are getting from the front end. So I'm just going to use a console log key because I want to show you on the console that this is the block key, that this is the information of the bearer token that the front end sends to the microservice. So on the console log, because these tokens come encoded, I'm just going to go JWT decode. I'm going to go token. So basically this function will grab the token, the encoded token, it will decode it using the JWT standard, and will throw that on the console. We are going to do this in order to actually make sure that we are actually coming here whenever the API is called. So now that I have the security scheme, how do I actually implement it to one or more of my APIs? So you go to your API, and I'm going to go to list customers, go open, and on the routing section, I'm going to click on edit, and under security options, I'm going to add the condition that it must match my security scheme. This is just a remarks field, remark for security scheme for the webinar, and just click on OK, and that's basically going to be validating that the token is correct. So if I click on run, I'm going to see that I am actually not going to see anything from that particular return, because I haven't told my frontend how to pass over the information for the token to the security scheme of the microservice. So first let me quickly show you that it's actually not returning anything. Just open one. So as you can see, this is the same grid that we have on other examples, but because we didn't send any information and we didn't validate, it's not returning anything basically. So that's where actually the security passes come in. This is like a step further, and this is how the credentials are used among different systems. And as I've said before, let me jump here. Since the microservice is called from the front end, we are typically going to have a centralized authorization server, and Blazedpath added a lot of out-of-the-box settings in order to utilize the credentials obtained on the login from the front end and reutilize them when calling other systems. They may be external or they may be internal, such as this microservice. To facilitate, we are going to use these security passes, and these security passes are not on the microservice but on the service that is responsible to send the token to the other one. So I'm going to click on my front end in this example, go new, and go add a new security pass, and this is going to be called my security pass webinar. So I have to complete 2 fields in here. Basically, the information I require in here is where I take the information from and where it goes. So the source is where it comes from. The information can come from a config parameter. As we previously discussed, this may be from maybe it's a static API key that doesn't expire, and you can create a config parameter with that information, and you know that's not going to expire anywhere from now until 2 years, so that you can actually use that as a config parameter and don't worry about ever again until you need to do another deploy. The other options is the cookies. These are in case you are storing anything from cookies. Let's say you are using something from forms with a lot of steps and you are persisting information in cookies, and you can actually pull from the cookies to send to other microservices as authentication. And the other one is the access token, which is the one we are going to be using today. This is just takes the access token that comes from the login and redirects it to wherever it needs. So access token, and the usage is where it needs to send it. So if we click on usages, we can see that we only have one security scheme right now. If we have multiple security schemes, maybe you have a lot of microservices, and those microservices may have different security schemes, but they all can use the same access token. So you would have to select all of those different endpoints in here. In here, we don't have to do anything else. Just close the security pass, click on run again. And basically, we are using the manager environment. This is going to take the security token from the front end. It's going to send it to the microservice as validation for that API, and we are going to finally see the result of the grid, which is basically what we had at first, but there was no validation. So as you can see, there is information. On the previous example, there was no information, and now we have a lot of information. So the last thing we have to discuss is what should you do when you have chains of microservices. Let's say you have second microservice, and maybe you have a third microservice in series, third microservice. So let's say your microservice 1 calls the microservice 2, and the microservice 2 calls the microservice 3. I'm explaining this section just because it's basically the same thing. You use a security pass on the second microservice to let it know that you have to send it to the third microservice, and you have to add a security path on each link of the microservice to let it know where to redirect the access token. There is not much to it. You do it exactly the same as we've done right now. If you go click new security pass on, in this case it will be here on the microservice. So this first microservice is going to have a redirect security pass. There you go. And you would take it from the config parameter or the call variable. In microservices, you use call variables. You can store on the blocky sections, you can store anything in a call variable, so you can store it and then pull it from the call variable using the call variable name. The source changes, but the concept is exactly the same. You grab the access token from one place and you redirect it to another. So those are all the examples for today. With all these security options, you can pretty much see that you are in full control of what the user can see on the front end, on the access points and the microservices. You can now try the security hands-on examples, or the one we are doing, we're using today. It's basically exactly the same. If you see that it has more stuff on in here on the security, on the architecture diagram, it's exactly the same. Just remember that the complexity of the access configuration for each one is done in the, for each user is done in the authorization server. So make sure you get someone familiar with those, or get someone in your team that is familiar with either Keycloak, OpenID Connect, or OAuth2, that can set up a proper environment. And until you get to that point, we recommend that you use mock accesses, because they are very easy to use, and they translate very quick, very easy to the actual examples connecting to the authorization servers. So let me jump over to the Q&A page, and we are going to check if we have any questions. I see that Darlene has a question that says, how do we define access roles of a user in Blazedpath? You don't. Basically, all of the responsibility of what the user can see, or maybe the roles, so the connection between the role and the user is done on the authorization server. Blazedpath only takes the role into consideration, and from the role you then go over using the paths we've seen on different pages, and the security option in each of the widgets and the actions. Blazedpath does not configure at all roles for users. That's only in the authorization servers. I think that's the only question we had today. Please, if you are seeing this video at a later time, just write, if you have any question, write it on the comments, or you can go to the forums and ask in there. If you have any other suggestion for upcoming webinars, or if you have any other question at all, please contact us. We're more than happy to answer any other questions you may have. So I think with that we are done for the day. Remember, if on your way out, don't forget to subscribe, please, and like the video. And basically we are going to see each other on the 10th webinar. Thank you.